So one of the things I had in my Tennessee bullet points was one of these bills that's being proposed in the Tennessee legislature for the next session that would deal with illegal. Actually, no, I had the whole school thing and banning cell phones in school, which is exactly needed. But that same lawmaker is also filing a bill, House Bill 11, which would require the state to redesign licenses, IDs, and permits so they be easily distinguished between those who are U.S. citizens and those who are not. So I want to talk more about this right now with Brandon Lewis. He is the founder of the Tennessee Conservative, of course, at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Brandon, how are you today, sir?
Glad to be on with the voice of conservatism in Chattanooga radio. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. I appreciate that. So, what do you think of these two bills? We got one being proposed by Todd Warner that would require law enforcement agencies with illegals in custody to request immigration detainers and require that the agency transport such individuals not taken into federal custody to Sanctuary City. What do you think about these two bills, and do they have any chance of passing?
Well, I think RINOs in the Tennessee legislature who have been killing these preventative bills for the last 4 years are going to have a real hard time doing it this time around because as I continue to hear from lawmakers all across the state, there's going to be a bevy of these bills. While I would prefer to see them cut off the magnets of employment, free education, welfare, and transportation, these are pretty good. Todd Warner's very conservative and outspoken, even in the face of leadership, and he's bringing a bill, House Bill 10, will require law enforcement agencies, when they arrest an illegal, to request a detainer and then to transport those individuals not taken into federal custody. For example, if ICE doesn't come pick them up in a timely fashion, and the bill would allow the state, I love this part, to recoup the transportation costs, whether by bus, car, or plane, by withholding and redirecting the federal petroleum taxes. So basically what he is suggesting is that we're going to withhold the money we would normally send to the federal government to deal with the illegal immigration problem that they have caused us. Another one, similarly related, is Scott Sapicki's House Bill 11, which requires that the state redesign licenses and IDs and permits to be easily distinguished. If someone is here illegally, if someone does not have citizenship status, it would say so on the license.
By the way, I'm really glad you said his name because I wasn't sure. It's Sapicki, not Kapicki. I keep mixing that up.
It's Sapicki. It's a, people have weird names. Why can't we just have Jones and Smith like we used to?
Well, my name is Yaffee, so I mean, you talk about the weirdest names. I can't complain too much about that. Okay, so you think it's a better chance of some of these things passing because it's such a big issue. And I guess with Trump winning, they're kind of emboldened, right? I mean, Trump's on the federal level, yes, but it kind of emboldens them to say, oh, the people really want stuff like this.
I don't know that they're emboldened as much as they're afraid. You don't see a lot of boldness in Republican leadership. What you see is fear that they won't get reelected or that their reputation will be tarnished if folks figure out how they'll vote. And as I've told all these lawmakers, we bring all these bills, and if the committees want to kill them one after the other, it's going to be hard to run a reelection campaign when somebody can tell everybody you voted against 3, 4, 5, 7 illegal immigration bills when it's the number one issue that GOP primary voters care about.
So I know you have mentioned some other provisions as well you would like to see. We've been talking about how Tennessee kind of has the magnet, which is a problem. Now, it is my understanding, though, that we do have E-Verify in this state, right? Am I correct on that?
We have E-Verify for employees of companies that are, I believe, 50 or larger. But, most small businesses in Tennessee don't meet that requirement.
Okay.
And then there are a lot of folks that don't comply. The law that's on the books doesn't have a lot of teeth in it. And further, it's never enforced, to my knowledge. I cannot remember I can't remember ever reporting on a story where Tennessee prosecuted or went after anyone who was knowingly using illegal immigrant labor past that mark. And of course, E-Verify is a good first step. It can be gamed from time to time, but it's just not something that Republicans have been willing to enforce.
Yeah, so it looks like you were right, except it's at least 35 employees. But okay, the issue is enforcement, which makes sense. What do you think about the arguments that we hear often from Democrats and Republicans that if we enforce something like that too much, it'll ruin our agricultural industry because we can't find Americans to do the jobs, Americans won't do on the farms and everything else?
Well, I think that there's a bigger discussion that has to be had about the American work ethic and what's happened to it. I grew up in a household that had been on various forms of generational welfare, and a lot of my cousins, and it inoculates people from self-respect and success. It gives folks just enough to lose their motivation, but not enough to live a real ample life. And I think one thing that we desperately need to do in this country, and it has not been discussed since Bill Clinton, is welfare reform. We've got all the labor that we need in the United States of America to do anything. But if you can get a cell phone and an air-conditioned home and enough money to buy a car and to enjoy some luxuries and cable TV and everything else, sometimes it's all people want. And so it used to be a long time ago, folks would rather starve than to be on welfare because self-respect and earning your way was a big deal. But we have lost that in our American culture, and we need to get it back.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I know that's something that J.D. Vance has talked about in the past, but it just seems insane to me that we can recruit people to join the military. There are people across this country that do tough jobs all the time, but somehow farming, we can't get Americans to farm. And it seems like, okay, there's something wrong in the incentive structure. And a lot of this, frankly, is the business leaders that are complaining about this. They're not being honest. They really just want the cheap under the table labor, and they can make them work as many hours as they want. They've had it too good, and they don't want to lose that.
The corporations run the Republican Party in Tennessee. As I've often said, we do not have a GOP. We have a COP. It's a corporately owned party. And you can look at where the money comes from. 95+% comes from outside the district and from special interest and Republican leadership. We have some good, solid conservatives, but very few of them make it to the chairs of committees or any type of leadership position because they know that they're too conservative, meaning that they will not compromise the values of their constituency to climb. There's not a bunch of them. And so they are kind of relegated to the outskirts. And I hope that there are enough of them, and I hope the political wind is blowing hard enough this year that we see some changes.
Speaking with Brandon Lewis, he is the founder of the Tennessee Conservative. You can read it at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Another story you had this week has to deal with Knox County, where there was a resolution put up once again to protect children from sexualization. You had a big effort to try to get that to pass, but it failed again. It was brought forward by Knox County Commissioner Rhonda Lee. What do you think about this?
So essentially this bill is about taxpayer-funded venues that host all ages drag shows and things that are similar. And this commissioner was essentially saying, okay, that's great. If you want to do that, you're not going to get your county funding. And so I think that's perfectly reasonable. I think it's a great incentive, but most folks that are politicians are afraid to take a bold stand. And the argument was made simply that, 365 days out of the year, they do good things. We can't pull the funding for the one thing that we don't agree with. And even though it didn't pass, at least it garnered a little bit more support. And whenever you see the Republicans and Democrats caucusing together, you often have to wonder, did they just run as a Republican because that's how their district was drawn? And in many cases, that's just what it is.
Now, what do you say to those that feel like we're just censoring speech when we deal with, say, the stuff in libraries and everything else in schools, what they're teaching kids? What's usually your response to that?
Well, we have true censorship of speech, and it is alive and well in our largest tech platforms, Facebook. I think I posted something the other day on Facebook, and it just showed that the whole country was red and only few parts were blue, and that the media wants you to believe that your conservative views are the minority when in fact you're in the majority. And it flagged me. It's false information. Some fact checker in Uzbekistan said it was. And, this is the kind of stuff we deal with. The censorship that we need to worry about is not the speck in the eye, it's the log in the eye, and that is all the corporate censorship that comes out of news media. It's all the search censorship, the platform censorship. If it weren't for Elon Musk and Twitter, we would not have a single solitary big tech platform where you can actually speak your mind without fear of reprisal. And so I don't think free speech is a man in panties shaking his junk in front of a kid's face in a taxpayer-funded venue. I don't think that's free speech. If you want to do that, go to a burlesque hall, be of age, etc. If you can do it, I guess, in the privacy of your own home, if you feel so led. I don't know what parent would do that. I'm sure there are some. But I think that common decency is not limiting free speech, and the pendulum has swung so far in the left direction. I think it's time for it to, in a more common sense fashion, come toward the center.
Yeah, it's always fascinating to me that they want to put these things in school libraries, but man, if you put up the 10 Commandments on the wall of a classroom, they just throw a fit. I mean, our priorities are just kind of screwed up, right? They're not really, kind of like what you said, they're not really for free speech. They're just for speech that they want to use on kids.
Well, they want the church to fail, and they want the church to be irrelevant, and they have done it successfully in many ways through the tax-exempt status. So many pastors are afraid to engage civically or politically because of the money. And, and it says in the Bible, you can't serve two masters. And there are a lot of pastors out there that are serving culture, they're serving money, they're not speaking out with the scriptures. And there is a push to get those Judeo-Christian values back into public life. Trump did a specific video on that as he was outlining his platform. And I hope that we see similar things like that happen all across the nation. And I tell you what, our government schools desperately need some sort of true center guidepost, because it seems from the stories that we report that it's just lost it.
Oh, absolutely right. Absolutely right. When I talk with teachers, the number one issue they face is discipline problems with the kids. They have no center of gravity. Like you said, they are not taught morality, virtue, anything like that. But unfortunately, they're also not taught it in many of our homes in this country. So that creates even more problems. Brandon Lewis, he is the founder of the Tennessee Conservative. Read it at TennesseeConservativeNews.com. Brandon, I really appreciate you coming on. As always, we'll talk to you again in the future.
Keep up the good work, buddy.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.